think we've got to turn the mic up a little bit. There we go. Today I have the pleasure of having Terry Johnson back again. Terry, thanks for coming.
Thanks for the invitation. Always a pleasure, Barry.
And you know, I wanted to have you here specifically after the events that occurred in Las Vegas because you're a weapons specialist. I mean,
Firearms, yes.
well, weapons, firearms, it doesn't, but you handle all kinds of weapons cases other than firearms cases.
That is correct.
And tell a little bit about your practice.
Sure, thank you. Well, again, pleasure to be here. I am, excuse me, criminal defense attorney. I practice everything from capital matters, which include homicide, possession of drugs, etc., all the way down to misdemeanors. But also one of the few attorneys in the state that have a specialty in firearms, in terms of firearms laws, understanding the laws, how they work, how they're applied, and also advocating in the Michigan Senate and House for better firearms laws for our people.
Now, recently we tried to have some new legislation passed with respect to concealed weapons,
Correct.
and the bill died apparently.
The bill is in the Senate, and there's been no movement. That's correct.
So it's flatlined, for lack of a better term.
For now, that is correct, yes.
And the most important reason that I wanted to have you on the show today is what happens in Vegas now doesn't stay in Vegas. And
Correct.
I'm not saying that facetiously, I'm saying that seriously. And off the air, you pointed out something to me really important. I said, you know, we ought to ban all semi-automatic weapons. That was my statement, wasn't it?
Correct.
And tell our
You
audience...
said automatic weapons.
Well, automatic weapons are banned.
Correct.
Semi-automatic weapons are not banned.
Correct.
And you said that semi-automatic weapons could be modified and made into automatic weapons without much work.
That's correct. And Barry, here's the thing you really have to understand. I think people, when they use terms, they truly don't understand what they're talking about. And if you'll allow me a moment, let me just kind of go over a couple of things, the difference between an automatic, a semi-automatic, and how this works. An automatic is basically and we're talking firearms, of course, is a firearm where I take the trigger, I pull it, and I just hold it down, and rounds just continue to come out as long as my finger, as you see right here, is pulled back. A semi-automatic, which is what is legal, and again, by the way, automatics are illegal. A semi-automatic basically means every time I pull the trigger, one round comes out. I pull twice, 2 rounds come out. I pull 3 times, 3 rounds come out. That's what's called a semi-automatic. And yes, to your question, there are some modifications that you can make to turn a semi-automatic into an automatic, but again, that would mean that you're in illegal possession of a firearm at that point.
Okay, laws were passed after Prohibition banning automatic weapons
Correct.
because those were used by gangsters in the day. The Tommy gun, for example.
Sure.
We'd see these movies on television with Elliot Ness and mass murders going on. And I pointed out to you, you know, there are a lot of catastrophic events in the world that we have no control over. For example, a tornado, a hurricane.
We should
Flooding.
ban them. We should ban floods. We should ban hurricanes. We should ban all of those things because, you know, of course, once you pass a law, people do exactly what the law says.
Yeah, they move in neighborhoods where there's going to be a flood or a hurricane, so we should make laws that prohibit them from either living in those areas or ban the hurricanes. I understand that.
Right.
I hope none of you are taking us seriously because we're going to get to a real important point here.
Right.
So let's ban the guns. And your response is?
If you ban a gun, if you believe that a criminal is going to, and again, a criminal by his very nature is someone that doesn't follow the law. If you ban a gun, that doesn't mean that you're going to not have shootings and other things. Criminals are still going to get guns. I'll give you an example. Canada has banned guns, yet there are shootings in Canada. How can that be when the whole the whole country has banned firearms? Why? Because criminals are still going to get them. I'll give you an example that's closer to home. Let's take Chicago. The city of Chicago has the most stringent gun laws in the country. Yet, What happened in Vegas in that 11 or 12 minutes is exactly what happens in the city of Chicago over the course of a month. So I don't know I know that that's not the answer, because what you're basically saying is, Barry, because you get a drunk driving and you run into somebody, let's say in Pontiac, we're going to turn to Terry, who's got a clean record, no points, no speeding tickets, nothing, and we're going to take his car away just because Barry did something that Barry knew was illegal. That's the analogy that people want to use.
So what's the solution? I mean, you've been practicing in this area for a long time. We need a solution to the problem.
Correct.
Can we pass laws that require testing, psychological testing, profiling, before we give a person the right to possess a firearm?
You know, that's a great question, and let's talk about that. First of all, do you understand the Second Amendment is the only amendment in the Constitution where you have to have a government check? So let me give you an example. If I have the right to free speech, I don't necessarily, and there's restrictions on that like there are other things, but I don't have to call the government before I go out and speak about, let's say, coming on the show. What about religion? If I'm Catholic and I want to practice Catholicism, I don't have to go to the government and say, is it okay that I practice Catholicism? And they may say, no, we want you to be a Baptist. We want you to be an apostolic. This is the only amendment that we have where the government continues to put their hands in it. There are things in place that should flag people, and there are laws against people not having firearms. For example, if you've been adjudicated mentally ill, you're not allowed to have a firearm.
But how would a gun dealer know that I was adjudicated mentally ill?
Great question, because we have this thing that's called NICS. It is I forget the acronym, what it stands for. National Criminal, it's on the tip of my tongue, but it's an FBI background check. And within there, it goes in and it tells the people that have felonies, they're disqualified automatically. The people that have disqualifying misdemeanors, for example, domestic violence. The people that have been adjudicated mentally ill, it's in there. The people that have been involuntarily committed to psychiatric places, it's in there. The things you're already asking for are already there.
So what seems to be the problem?
I think, Barry, the problem is truly we have a tendency in this country when something happens, we want to turn and say, who's the blame? Who do we blame for this? And instead of looking at two causes, the first one is the person who actually did this. There was no way that any law that was going to be passed could have prevented this tragedy. We need to come to grips with that. We have evil in our society, and we have to understand how to handle that. The second problem is we always want to look at the tool that the person used. So instead of looking at the gun, oh my God, if we didn't have the gun, this wouldn't happen. This gentleman could have easily driven a truck filled with fertilizer and ammonium. He could have put a bomb somewhere close to that area. As a matter of fact, he was a licensed pilot. Can you imagine if he decided to go to the airport, which was 2-3 miles away, hop in his private plane, and fly right into that crowd of 22,000? That would have caused more damage. But instead, before a shell casing hits the ground after it's been ejected out of a firearm, we've got people coming out saying, we have got to change the gun laws. We got to stop making it political.
But what are we going to do to remove the fear so that I feel comfortable going to a football game? I feel comfortable going to a hockey game. I feel comfortable going to the symphony or to a concert without fear that some demented person is going to come in the room, and I'm talking about the room where we're all assembled, or
Sure.
the stadium where we're assembled, and open fire.
Great question. Let's talk about that. Do you realize in Michigan it's illegal to go into all the places you just named, a stadium, whether it's a football game, a hockey game, a symphony, assuming that they seat more than 2,500 people, it is illegal for someone to go in there with a firearm, let alone open fire. You realize, and counsel, I know you know this, murder is against the law.
What the point I'm making is, do we have to create an environment similar to the environment that we have when we board an airplane, that every time you enter a public place where there's a large crowd, whether it be a football game, a hockey game, baseball game, I could go on and on and on, that we have to pass through a metal detector now to get in the door?
Well, unfortunately, that's what we're doing, and it's not working in every case. I mean, let's be real. If a demented person wants to kill someone, if somebody wanted to kill you or I, we could put every precaution around us to make sure that they don't do it. But you know what? They're going to figure a way out. What you're suggesting is we're just going to take this one tool away, and because it's this tool, i.e. a gun, everything else is going to go away. We're going to live in peace, harmony, and tranquility across the country. It's not going to happen.
Now, I want you listeners to call in, because if you have questions, this is the gun man. He's a specialist. And we're going to shift gears in a minute and talk about guns, but I want to finish this thought for a minute. You know, when you go to the courthouse, if you go to Oakland County Courthouse, you got to take your belt off.
Yes.
I asked the sheriff, I said, what's in my belt? He said, well, you could have a knife secreted in your belt. I mean, you really have to be mentally ill to take the time to hide a knife in your belt to go in the courthouse to attack somebody.
Yeah, but unfortunately it happens. I'll give you a movie. Do you remember In the Line of Fire? Came out a few years ago. It just to bring your audience up to speed for those who haven't watched it before, is about a gentleman who was trying to assassinate the president, and a Secret Service agent was after him. It shows how this guy made a firearm out of, I believe, wood, and how he snuck it through security, and how he was ready to assassinate the president.
Yes, I remember that.
Now, here's the thing. That was 1992, 1993, somewhere in that time frame. Think about what happens when we have technology advances. What happens? It increases our opportunity to do things. I mean, look at the phone we have right here. We're able to push buttons as opposed to back in our day, Barry. We had to do the rotary dial, okay? We have GPS. And guess what? Even in firearms, technology has allowed us to do other things with firearms as well. Even shooting more rounds, you know, we talk about the bump stock, things along those lines. So technology can either be good, it can be bad, but however you choose to use it, it's here, and we can't operate under the same mentality that we have for many years.
Okay, so it's the people who are causing the problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and speaking of people, let's talk about people who possess guns legally in their homes
Yes.
for a moment. I have a permit for a gun. I'm registered. I'm completely legal to have a gun in my house.
Yes.
An intruder breaks into my house. Can I shoot the intruder?
In Michigan, as long as you are in imminent fear, get me in there, thank you.
Yeah.
As long as you're in imminent fear of death, great bodily harm, or criminal sexual conduct, commonly known as rape, you're allowed to use lethal force. Now, the presumption is if someone's breaking into your home, your castle, that they're there to do you great harm. I mean, they're not coming in to steal a sandwich. They're not coming in to watch a football game with you or anything along those lines. The presumption is they're there, they are in your home to do you harm. So yes, under those circumstances, you would be allowed to use lethal force. And notice I use the term lethal force, because when you say lethal force, that means any force that you use that could potentially kill someone. So if I pick up a baseball bat, if I pick up a gun, if I use a knife, I'm going to get, if I'm charged, it's going to be the same charge. The ultimate charge would be homicide, first or second degree, etc.
Okay, same scenario. And my son's standing next to me. and he doesn't have a permit for a gun, but he lives in the house with me. And I say to my son, get the gun, there's an intruder.
Right.
And you know this has happened.
Sure.
And my son shoots the intruder. Has he violated the law?
Absolutely not. Because in Michigan, what people don't understand is, one, you don't need a permit to have a firearm in your home. That permit is for you to carry your firearm concealed outside of your home. That's the purpose of the permit. So as long as your son can legally possess a firearm, in other words, he's not a convicted felon, he's not mentally ill, there's no court order or anything along those lines preventing him from holding or possessing that firearm, he's legal and he can do that.
Does that gun have to be registered in order for my son to use it?
That's a great question. You know, registration in Michigan, I believe, is a very archaic process. We're one of 5 states across the country that requires registration of firearms. If you do not register the firearm, it is a civil infraction of $250. It's not it's like a very expensive parking ticket. It is not a misdemeanor. It's not a felony. Your firearms by law should be registered, but if by chance it's not registered, it's not the end of the world.
Okay, if I don't have a registered gun and I buy a gun that's not registered and I keep the gun in the house, have I committed a crime?
Well, first of all, I think we have to talk about the process of buying a firearm. Number one, in order to buy a firearm, there's 2 people. There are the people with
Listeners, this is real important. This is one of the most important questions I've ever asked about guns. I want you to pay attention. Please, my
Sure.
question again. If I buy a gun on the street, I said on the street,
Correct.
and I don't register the gun and I bring it home and keep it in the house and use it for protection, am I in violation of the law?
That's a great question, and it's going to take me a minute to answer, but please
Take
listen
10
to
minutes.
Here's the thing you have to understand. There's 2 ways to purchase a firearm in the state of Michigan. If you have a concealed pistol license, a CPL, what you have to do is as follows. The first thing you have to do is fill out what's called a RI-60. What that is a form. You put your information on it, your name, you put the other person's information on it, the serial number, et cetera, et cetera. If you have a concealed pistol license, that number goes on there as well. And that's one person buying a concealed pistol license from another person. So on the street, and I'm assuming if you have a CPL, I have a CPL, we can do this. In other words, fill out paperwork. You keep a copy, I keep a copy. I turn one into the local police station. And who turns that in? The person who's purchasing the firearm. What if I don't have a concealed pistol license? That's when it comes about. If I don't have a concealed pistol license, what happens is as follows. I have to go to the local police station that I live in. Highland Park, Detroit. If it's Detroit, and I know this has recently changed, I believe it is Fort Street. I believe that's the precinct. Don't quote me on that because they change it around sometimes. But you have to go there and get what's called a 30-day permit. What is that? That's a permit that allows you to buy a firearm from another individual. And you have 30 days to do that. At the end of that process, you do the same thing. The seller keeps the seller keeps a copy of the form, you keep a copy of the form, and one form is turned back into the police department. If you don't have a concealed pistol license and you want to go to a gun store, for example, Target Sports down in Target Sports, you want to go to Top Gun, any of those places, you can go there and they'll run a background check on you, and they'll also give you the information that you have to file with your police. Now, if you buy a gun off the street, you have done something illegal if, A, you don't have a concealed pistol license, and you don't fill out the proper and necessary paperwork. If you don't have a concealed pistol license, again, you need to go to your local police station. If you're in Highland Park, come right to the Highland Park Police, get a 30-day permit. Same thing with Detroit or whatever jurisdiction you're in.
Do I need a concealed pistol license to buy a gun from a gun dealer?
No, you do not. They will run a background check on you. This is the NICS background check that we talked about
Right.
earlier. This will determine, A, whether you are capable of, is there anything stopping you from possessing a firearm? In other words, are you a felon? Is there a court order out against you from possessing a firearm? Have you been adjudicated mentally ill? Is there a domestic violence issue that's on your criminal background? So the answer, the short answer is no.
Okay, so I buy the gun. I'm driving home,
Got to be careful with that.
okay? I put the gun next to me on the front seat because I'm really proud of the fact that I bought a gun to protect my family.
Yes.
I run a red light. I get stopped by the police department.
Yes.
They say, "Where's your CPL?" I say, "I don't need a CPL." And I say it legitimately. I don't need a CPL. The gun is in the box. I'm taking it home.
It's registered to me.
Right, here's the paperwork for the gun. And they say, "You're carrying a concealed weapon in the car."
That is correct.
And you're ready to pull your hair out. We don't have much hair left to pull out, but you're ready to pull your hair out, aren't you?
Yeah, and people have to understand, Michigan is a state that has over 20,000 firearms laws on the books. And let me just harp on that for a minute. It's over 180,000 words, 524 pages. It's single-spaced. And you understand this as an attorney. If you started right now and just read every word and went all the way through, it'll take you approximately 15 hours if you read it 200 words a minute, and that's without a break. So when someone says, we need more gun laws, over 20,000, that's a lot. But to answer your question, when you purchase a firearm, you possess a firearm, you discharge a firearm, you display a firearm. If you do any of those things, you need to understand the laws that are behind it. You cannot in Michigan transport a firearm in the manner in which you just said, which is in the car, unless you have a concealed pistol license. The proper and only way in Michigan to transport that firearm without a concealed pistol license is it has to be unloaded, it being the firearm. It has to be in a case designed for a firearm, probably what you just purchased it in. It has to be in the rearmost part of the vehicle, so the trunk. If you don't have a trunk, if you've got an SUV, it goes all the way in the back. And I get this question all the time about court. Oh, go ahead. I forgot.
Go ahead, we got a call. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm fine. I got a question about, I'm a federal law enforcement. I got credentials, and I was wondering if that transcends or overpowers all the local laws when it comes to concealed weapon carry.
That's a great question, sir. Let me answer that. Back in 2001, then President George W. Bush, right after 9/11 passed, or went through Congress, and they passed a law called LEOSA, which is the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act. What that does is as follows. It allows any law enforcement officer, and there's a category, you as federal obviously fall into this, but it allows a federal, state, reserve officers, and they've expanded the list, to carry a firearm concealed in other states. Now, there are certain places under LEOSA that you can't carry that firearm, and I'll tell you what those are briefly. Number one, you can't carry it into state or federal buildings. So if you went into, let's say, the Secretary of State here in Michigan, I can carry in there because I've got a concealed permit. If you don't have a concealed permit from Michigan or another state, guess what? You can't carry in there under LEOSA. Other places that you can't carry, private property, schools, etc., under LEOSA. And one thing also to keep in mind as it relates to LEOSA, one thing you really got to understand is it covers the firearm, but not necessarily the magazine. So I'm not sure, is he still on the line?
He's listening.
Question, what type of firearm do you carry, if you don't mind?
He'd have to call back in to tell
Oh,
us.
that's okay. Here's the thing. The thing you want to keep in mind is this: the magazine is what gets a lot of people in trouble. So if you go into like California, for example, California, as a LEOSA officer, you can carry your firearm, but if your magazine capacity is beyond 10 rounds, you can't carry that magazine in there. So you're going to have to get a different magazine.
Hold on for a second. Are you back with us?
No, this is another call.
Okay. We'll be right with you.
Well, but just let me
He made
wrap
a
this up.
mistake.
Sir, just let me finish the other gentleman's question real quick. But under LEOSA,
Okay.
you do have those powers. You just have to be careful, and there are some traps in there, like any law. You have to understand, school zones you're not allowed to go into, private property, places along those lines. But yes, your LEOSA privileges will trump, what the state laws
Don't
say.
use that word Trump on my show. Okay, gentlemen. We're back to our next caller. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Yes. His opening statement was that Canada bans firearms. Canada doesn't ban firearms. They have restrictions on certain firearms, and you have to have licenses for certain restricted firearms. But firearms overall aren't banned in Canada. So for him to be an expert, how are we to believe anything he says if he doesn't know that?
Well, let's be very clear here. What goes on in Canada, I'm not an expert in firearms laws in Canada. I'm not a practicing attorney in Canada. My statement involving Canada, yes, certain people can have firearms if, in fact, you're hunting and things along those lines. But if you really want to get specific, the average person on the street cannot carry a firearm. The average person on the street, as it relates to Canada, cannot carry a concealed firearm or even have one in their home. So if you're looking to nitpick, I hopefully cleared that up so you understand.
No, I wasn't looking. I wasn't looking to nitpick. You made a mistake by saying that firearms are banned in Canada, and they are not. You just have to have a background check and a license.
Well,
Furthermore, because of the safety checks, their shooting incidences are far less than those in the United States.
and you say
It's a valid argument. I mean, the United States has far too many shootings. That's all there is to it.
of any shooting where someone that just took place in Vegas, one is way too many. But my point being, there's really not another law that you're going to place on the books that's going to stop that. If you believe right now in Michigan we've got over 20,000 laws on the books, do you think by adding another 500 to 700 words would have stopped this person in Vegas or even here in Michigan, if this happened here, from doing this kind of act? It's not going to. That's my point in bringing this up.
I disagree with you, and the reason is that if the laws were stricter, a lot of the shootings wouldn't occur. Thank you for taking my call.
Well, sir, don't hang up. I got a question for you, if you don't mind. My question is, what one law would you like to see passed? You say if laws were stricter, murder is against the law. Yet people murder in every state every single day. This is what I don't understand. If something is in a man's heart to do something and it's evil, he's going to do anything he can do to stop that. There's no law that's going to stop someone from doing something if they get in their head that they want to do it.
So what law?
If they can't-
What
if
law
they-
would you
if they
pass?
can't- Okay, listen. If they can't easily afford the firearms or the ammunition, if they can't easily obtain that, then that would certainly curtail some. Yes, it would.
The guy that did this was rich. He was a millionaire. He had all kinds of money.
We're not speaking specifically of him. I'm speaking of the people who get killed Saturday night in Detroit.
Do you think that if you take a city like Chicago, Do you?
Let's talk about Detroit. That's where we be.
Okay, sure. Take a city like Detroit. Do you think that criminals who are stealing guns are going to stop and say, you know what? I'm not going to steal this gun. It's too expensive. So I'm not going to go kill somebody. Criminals are criminals. They are going to break the law no matter what law you put forth. And if your position is, I want to make it more difficult, what you're basically saying is this to me: because this guy did something bad, I'm going to make it hard on everybody else. So if a guy speeds down the road and he's got 10 suspended license or driving under suspended licenses on his record, why don't we, instead of punishing just him, let's punish everybody? So we're going to put governors on every single solitary car. Because I could tell you this, I can end drunk drivings tomorrow. You know how? Get rid of cars. Let's go back to horses and buggies. That way, if I want to drink, I can do that. I just get on the horse. The horse will take me home. The horse will not cause any kind of traffic accident or anything else. But the problem that we look at is we see a situation like this, and the first thing we want to do is turn around and say, we need to get rid of this tool. So let's apply that to every single time there's a tragedy in our sighting system.
Sir, thank you.
That's your solution. That's not my solution. My solution is to make it more difficult to obtain ammunition and firearms through background checks, for example. And
they're already there.
But there's no way that guy would have been able to buy that many firearms had he been closely followed by the authorities when he was buying them.
Well, first of all, you understand he didn't buy 30-something guns in like 2 days. He did it over the course of a year.
I don't care how many days you bought them in.
Well, and that's the problem. See, no matter what I'm going to say to you, you're not going to listen to reason and logic.
That's why it's an argument. I dispute your claim.
Okay, well, thank you.
What he's missing in all of this is the fact that, number one, background checks are already there. He went through a Nevada background check, which, believe it or not, is more stringent than federal.
Okay, we're going to take another call in a minute, but I want to point out something that our listener didn't think of, we haven't discussed. I can go to a garage sale. I can buy all the ammunition that's available from the estate of a hunter.
Sure.
I can buy a target pistol there. I can buy a pistol there to assist me in killing an animal.
Well, you can't buy a pistol there unless you do it properly. There's a proper way to do
Well, what
that.
I'm saying is if the estate and the family and everybody doesn't know the rules and they want to sell everything he had, it's all gone.
And I can also buy knives and other things to kill people. But let me just go back to what you just said about ammunition. Do you realize that people can make their own ammunition?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's really a moot point as it relates to I can buy all the ammunition. If you banned every single round of ammunition today and every single gun, and I want to go back to the caller's point, so, well, this is Detroit. Do you think Detroit would not have homicides? No, because the people who want guns are still going to get them, and the people who are out here committing crimes are still going to commit them, even though we got laws on the books saying no.
Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. The problem is, as you say, weapons don't kill. It's people that kills. And I don't know how long you all been on this planet and here in America, but we had to do the research and the history. I mean, when you look at understand the world that we live in today, and then we go about the business of or trying to force the mindset. The mindset, understand, of the people of the world is war, and so far as you trying to, guns being banned or anything like that, it's a mindset that has to be destroyed or whatever. My take on what took place in Vegas, and it's just my take on it, is that understand it's more than what the eye or what we were seeing or been told that went on over in Vegas. I just can't accept the fact that you could say an individually went up and did what he did, had that many, and no one seems to see anything or whatever. And all this took place. It reminds me of other incidents like what happened in the Gulf of Tonkin, what happened with the Maine, what happened really with 9/11. The people are so easy to be swayed by media, and the overall picture. You got to delve into everything before you start just running off what you see go across the news or whatever. And until the mindset of the people is changed, it's going to continue on regardless. Like you say, you could take a screwdriver, you could take a pop bottle, or whatever. I mean, it's the mindset that we are witnessing here in this world that we live in. I mean, the nuclear bombs. I mean, we're constantly doing things, understand, to kill, viruses, drugs, pharmaceutical. I mean, we have to look at the world that we're living in, and we got blindness on, and some of us don't really want to see it for what it is today. But
Thank
we're
you.
at the end of all of this, and and it's time for the masses to wake up and to realize it.
Thank you.
You all have a blessed day.
You too.
What a intelligent caller that was. I mean, he's absolutely right. You can eliminate the gun, but it's not going to eliminate the problem.
Well, the problem that I need to address with you is that there's so many people who will legally possess and use guns.
Legally or illegally?
Illegally possess and use guns.
Sure.
I mean, you mentioned Chicago. There isn't a month that goes by in Chicago where there isn't 200 or 300 people killed or shootings. It's horrible. It's
Right.
It's
And
like
they have the strict, and this goes back to the caller before this one, they've got the strictest gun laws in the country, and it's not working.
Now, you work with an organization called Firearms Legal Protection.
I do.
And what's the purpose of this organization?
Firearms Legal Protection, and feel free to go to our website, firearmslegal.com. What we do is protect individuals who use lethal force for self-defense. And what do I mean? If you're protecting yourself or others, and you use a firearm, a knife, a screwdriver, as long as it's a legal object, we will provide legal assistance to you as long as you are a member. Becoming a member is very easy and it's not expensive. And what we provide is uncapped attorney's fees. So you have responsible attorneys that understand the law who will protect you. We provide bail bond protection because, again, we don't want people who are protecting themselves, kind of like you talked about you and your son in your home, who are protecting yourself. We don't want you to be the victim of, having to spend $50,000 to $100,000 in legal bills to get you out of something that you were doing nothing but protecting yourself.
So it's kind of legal insurance for people who are not violating.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How much does it cost?
Well, you can get uncapped attorney's fees for as low as $9.95 a month, which is almost a trip to Starbucks or a trip to McDonald's for that purpose. You want to be covered in all 50 states, it's about $18.95 a month. And that gives you bail bond protection, expert witness fees, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, and that protects you if you're in this, for example, in a self-defense situation.
Correct. If you're at home or you're out and about, you're out walking your dog and an attacker comes up to you and you've got to use a knife, a gun, or something or other, and the police end up charging you because this criminal said it wasn't, you were the aggressor, etc., we would totally cover your legal fees.
How does this organization make a decision to represent an individual? Because oftentimes it's a gray area. For example, someone's pounding on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think it's an intruder, and I shoot through the door.
Ooh, that's not a good thing to shoot through the door.
Okay, well, that's why I mentioned it.
Basically, what we do, we're the only organization that has a 24-hour hotline. As a member, you get a number. You call that number. An attorney answers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He's going to advise you what to do, and then we're going to dispatch a local attorney out. So if you're in this area, we've got a local attorney. If you're in California, we've got local attorneys there. If you're in Texas, we have local attorneys there as well. What we do is once the call comes in, our first charge is to make sure our member is okay. Now, as we go down the path and we find out that you say you were in like 7-Eleven, you were protecting the people that came in, but the video comes out and we see you put a ski mask on, point a gun at someone, and he's giving you money, we're going to stop representation at that point. But until something comes about that shows something different, our first and foremost mission is to make sure our members are protected.
But if I shoot somebody through the door, you're not going to offer me protection, are you?
We're going to find out what's going on. We're going to initially offer you protection. We're going to have our attorney on the phone, and we're going to find out the basics of what happened. You know, you said shooting through the door. Well, let's put a few more things. Was the door being kicked in? Was it someone that you had a PPO out against? You know, it's not just black and white.
Now, I've got a real important question to ask you because I'm going to be heading off shortly to an expungement program down in River Rouge.
Yes.
We're assisting felons to get their records clear. It's against the law for a convicted felon to have a firearm.
Well, that's a very interesting question. The answer is yes and no. It depends upon what the felony was, and I'm referring to Michigan, not federal law right now. If it was a specified felony, the answer is yes, he has to have his rights restored. If it's a non-specified felony, after a certain period of time. So let me give you an example.
And this is important for listeners, please.
If I have a felony conviction of failure to pay child support at the end of my probation, and let's say that happened 10 years ago, am I allowed to possess firearms? The answer to that is yes, I'm allowed to possess. Now notice I didn't say carry concealed. Possess as being in my home. I'm allowed to do that. Certain felonies involving drugs, involving firearms, involving violence, those felonies you are not allowed to possess. So for example, if I shot you with a gun and let's say I shot you with a gun, or I possessed, I get charged with a drug crime. After 5 years, I have to petition to have my rights restored. So it depends on which category the person falls in.
So let's say I get my record expunged
Yes,
and I have no record. Can I have a firearm?
you can have a firearm.
What about the federal law that says felons aren't allowed to possess firearms?
Great question. And a lot of that they defer back to the state. So if a felon is not allowed to have a firearm but your record has been expunged, the feds look at that and they say, okay, this has been adjudicated by the court, it's off his record, he or she is good to go to possess a firearm. Now, purchasing is another thing. Just because I can possess a firearm, you know, going back to what we talked about before as a convicted felon, and again, depends if you're specified or non-specified, I want to make that clear. I'm going to use the child support analogy. If I had a felony of child support years ago and I'm beyond my 4 years, the case is closed, and I want to possess a firearm, I can. Can I purchase a firearm? The answer to that is no, because you've got to go through a background check, and the feds will not allow you to purchase a firearm if you have a felony on your record.
Here's the question for the day, and I really appreciate you coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
Grandpa dies. He collects rifles.
Yes.
I'm a convicted felon. Grandma comes to me and she says, here, your grandfather wanted you to have his favorite shotgun. I take the shotgun home. I use the shotgun, and my neighbor calls the police and says, John is a convicted felon, and I saw him using the shotgun.
Mhm.
The police knock on the door, say, do you have a shotgun? I present them, say, well, Grandpa gave me this shotgun. Am I in violation of the law?
Great question. I'm going to go back to what I just said before. It depends on what type of felony you had, whether you're allowed to possess or not. So if you had a non-specified felony,
I'd say you had a specified felony.
if you had a specified felony, the answer is no. Grandpa could have given you 100 guns, but you can't take a single one of them. And just so your audience is clear, it's not only firearms that you're not allowed to have, it's also ammunition. So as one of the callers talked about, ammunition and things, as a felon, you're not allowed to have one single round of ammunition as well.
Okay. Can I be around other people who were firing guns?
Great question.
And it's my last question.
Oh,
Because I know you have a busy day. You got to get ready for Michigan State.
Go green.
I let him get that in because he came on the air today.
Can you be around others that have firearms as long as you don't possess? One of the things that I think some of your callers may, or your audience may be interested in is, what if I live with someone and they've got a CPL and I'm a convicted felon? How does that work? Again, if your rights have been restored automatically under the, if you're not a specified felon, you're okay. But if you're specified, you got to make sure that gun is put away in a safe. It's locked up, that if someone were to come in, they know that you don't even have access to that firearm or anything along those lines.
Suppose it's in a padlocked room and I've got the key to the room, but I don't use the room. Am I still in possession?
I think the prosecutor can make an argument that you have access, and that could be viewed as possession.
Tell our listeners how to get a hold of you.
Thank you. If you'd like to get a hold of me regarding any legal firearms questions, feel free to call my office, Law Office of Terry L. Johnson. I can be reached at area code 313-967-5629. Again, that's area code 313-967-5629. If you're interested in legal protection for protecting yourself in the use of lethal force, please go to our website at firearmslegal.com. That's firearmslegal.com. And thank you very much, and God bless, and go green.
We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. I'll be off the air next week, so it'll be 2 weeks, and I'll be back. Have a great day. And thanks again for coming.
Thank you. My pleasure.